Next Saturday, the colourful and outrageous adventures of Paul Newman and Robert Redford as the semi-legendary heroes Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That's at 8 o'clock next Saturday.
Christmas goodies from the BBC. There's a great selection of videos. 25 years of Match of the Day begins in the 60s.
It's a magnificent goal! Best, a great goal!
Children's entertainment with the delightful antics of Barney.
It's all fun, Prophet.
And for comedy, the best of Rory Bremner.
And why not?
Just 3 of a huge collection of videos. Ideal Christmas goodies from the BBC.
We head for the Guildhall in Preston in 15 minutes for continued coverage of the UK International Snooker Championship. Now at 5 to 10, it's time for the news and sport with Martin Lewis and Rob Bonnet.
The crisis in Czechoslovakia's government deepens as yet another top communist is forced to resign. With 500,000 protesters on the streets yet again, 8 leading political dissidents are set free. And Scottish Tories pledge support for the Prime Minister as 2 new opinion polls claim her support is slipping. Good evening. 500,000 pro-democracy demonstrators kept up the pressure for free elections on the streets of Czechoslovakia today, telling the Communist Party that Friday's sacking of 7 of its leaders was not enough. So, 1 leading member of the new Politburo was forced to resign, 8 prominent dissidents who'd been accused of political crimes were pardoned and set free, and the Prime Minister promised another meeting with opposition groups next week.
When last night's first editions hit the streets, everyone thought they knew what the news was. The communist old guard had resigned en masse. By this morning, the queues for the later editions knew better. Only a few of the most unpopular figures were gone. The rest were involved in a complex game of political musical chairs. But it was a game which left Czechoslovak television news floundering. The commentators were anxious suddenly to be fair and balanced, but the scene at the hastily summoned conference of Communist Party activists, which was televised live, was so confused that no one knew what was going on. Suddenly, a fully paid-up party member was demanding the head of the most unpopular leader of all, Miloslav Stepan, the Prague party boss. More extraordinary still, Stepan duly resigned, live on air. He was supposedly an advocate of the Tiananmen Square solution, using troops against the demonstrators. The delegates gave a dutiful but scarcely rapturous welcome to the grave figure who emerged last night as the country's new leader, and Karol Urbanek politely clapped back. He's risen without trace and was only a compromise candidate anyway. His rhetoric was opaque. The basic question is, are we for socialism without mistakes, with people and for people? In other words, the Communist Party is in shambolic shape and is desperately playing for time. Overlooking Wenceslas Square tonight, a special edition of the newspaper Svobodny Slovo, covering the latest political crisis, was being prepared. It's so badly produced, it's scarcely readable. But its attack on the government for last week's police brutality helped to trigger off the big demonstrations here. The man who wrote that attack was hard at work again tonight. He's got through a lot of cigarettes in the course of the political revolution.
The development here in Czechoslovakia was more quick than in Poland and even in Hungary or even than in GDR.
There's a lot of people that say it's all down to you, it's all your fault.
Yeah, I think that's a general point of view among the journalists.
And among the crowds, there was once again a hunger for news of the political crisis. Only this time, the resignations within the leadership were genuine and not for show like last night. And they may only be the start. John Simpson, BBC News, Prague.
The former Prime Minister Alexander Dubček, ousted by the Soviet army 21 years ago, has dismissed the Politburo changes as a maneuver and urged the nation to be watchful, while another leading protester said, "We are now receiving verified reports that the new leadership of the party is a trick and that the instruments of power are being taken over by neo-Stalinists."
The centre of Prague was deserted this afternoon. Almost the entire adult population of the city had flocked to a park to give their verdict on the reshuffle. The playwright Václav Havel summed up most people's feelings when he said that the party resignations were just a trick and nothing had really changed. Alexander Dubček agreed.
Yesterday, the Central Committee made some personnel changes, but they failed to reply to our main demands.
Opposition leaders are insisting that the general strike plan for Monday should go ahead. And judging by the turnout today, it's likely to be pretty solid. More support for the democracy movement came from a different quarter. Cardinal Tomaszek, Prague's 90-year-old archbishop, was celebrating a mass this morning to mark the canonization of St. Agnes, a 12th century Czech saint. In his sermon, the cardinal made his democratic sympathies clear. No one should stand aside in these important days for the nation, he said. The crowd outside were delighted. Even the policemen cheered. The Catholic Church attracts a rather different kind of support from the demonstrators who go to Wenceslas Square. They're older, and many of them are Slovaks from the east of the country. But they too seem to have been swept up by the patriotic flavour of the protest movement. And the church has suffered as much as anyone from communist persecution. For the past 40 years, anybody in this country who went to church risked losing their job. Today there's the hope that a new era of religious freedom is about to begin. Stephen Milligan, BBC News, Prague.
Mrs. Thatcher welcomed the changes in Czechoslovakia as she returned from talks with President Bush. She now faces her first leadership challenge. A Mori poll in tomorrow's Sunday Times says the former Defence Secretary, Michael Heseltine, is the most popular choice as leader. Over 1,000 people were questioned in 55 constituencies. And according to a Harris poll in tomorrow's Observer, 1 in every 3 Conservative supporters thinks Mrs. Thatcher should go before the next election. Over 1,000 people were interviewed at 100 sampling points.
As the Prime Minister was returning to London to face her first leadership challenge, her young supporters north of the border were using their conference to proclaim Scotland the home of Thatcherism. The voters have yet to be convinced. They elected just 10 Conservative MPs at the last election. But the Scottish Secretary, Malcolm Rifkind, was loudly applauded when he said the party should stick with Mrs. Thatcher, a 3-time winner. Little support here or among prospective candidates meeting at the same hotel for any alternative leader, least of all Sir Anthony Meyer. But one of Mrs. Thatcher's most loyal lieutenants in Parliament blamed the latest poll results in part on that challenge.
It's always damaging to have apparent dissension, and I think we need to get the message across that within the party there is great support for the Prime Minister, and that those who are causing difficulties within the party are playing into the hands of our opponents.
While Tory activists know there isn't always quite so much support for Mrs. Thatcher on the doorsteps, their instinct is to unite for fear of damaging the party further. Although Mr. Rifkind suggested Conservative fortunes weren't inextricably linked with Mrs. Thatcher's.
The Conservative Party in Scotland fights on the record not of any one individual, but of the government as a whole. I happen to think Margaret Thatcher has been a superb Prime Minister, and I hope she remains Prime Minister for a good time to come. But, you know, elections aren't about individuals.
Mr. Rifkind caught the mood best when he told the conference the Conservatives' greatest asset was unity.
An exit poll in the Indian election predicts that the Indian Premier, Rajiv Gandhi, will lose his majority, leaving the country politically deadlocked. In one of the most violent elections since independence, 97 people have died amid widespread allegations of vote rigging.
Mr. Gandhi seems on the brink of losing not only the premiership, but control of his own Congress party. The exit poll indicates he has lost over 220 seats. His decimated party is likely to hold him accountable, because Mr. Gandhi not only chose the timing of this election, he approved all Congress candidates and cast himself as chief vote catcher.
If this poll is right, and Congress gets only 193 seats, I think it will be curtains for Rajiv Gandhi. He will still be the leader of the largest party in the Lok Sabha, but that won't be the basis for forming a government, because I'm quite sure that no other party, not the BJP, not the Communists, would serve under him. Therefore, Congress will have to change its leader.
The scale of the violence and vote rigging in the election has stunned this country. In Calcutta, tear gas was used to restrain angry mobs. Here, it was Congress supporters protesting at alleged malpractice by the Marxist Communist Party. In New Delhi, a prominent human rights campaigner, Mr. Inder Mohan, is staging a hunger strike outside the Election Commission office. He wants a repoll in the Prime Minister's constituency, where an opposition candidate was shot and seriously wounded. Tonight, the Election Commission confirmed that it's investigating complaints of malpractice in 91 constituencies. That's about a fifth of the overall total. Even so, the counting of votes will start on schedule tomorrow, a count that's now expected to spell the end of a political dynasty. Brian Barron, BBC News, New Delhi.
Spanish police believe they have broken up a Middle Eastern terrorist group planning a series of bomb attacks across Europe. A large quantity of plastic explosives was found packed inside tins of jam and other food on board a freighter docked in Valencia. The ship had arrived from Lebanon, and police are working non-stop to open 25,000 tins. The final haul of explosives could reach 1.5 tons. Government officials said that 8 people had been arrested, of whom 3 were alleged to be members of the Islamic extremist group Hezbollah. There are just 2 people left with a chance of becoming the first Briton in space on board the Anglo-Soviet Juno space mission. Helen Sharman, a food scientist, and Major Timothy Mace of the Army Air Corps will now begin a final intensive training program leading up to the final liftoff in 18 months' time. We have just received reports that 2 people were shot dead when Transkei police attacked a church hall where African National Congress leaders were due to speak. The group included 77-year-old Walter Sisulu, who was released from prison last month. He was unhurt. It's understood pandemonium broke out when police lobbed tear gas canisters into the hall. And now, with news of the day's sport, including another commanding performance from the All Blacks, here's Rob Bonnet.
Aston Villa have made it a 3-way tie at the top of the First Division by beating Wimbledon 2-0 at Plough Lane. The victory extended an impressive run. Villa have won 7 of their last 8 league games.
November has been a memorable month for Villa, and on a bitterly cold day at Plough Lane, there was further evidence of their championship potential. Manager Graham Taylor's encouragement has obviously inspired Tony Daly. His skill gave England new boy David Platt the opportunity to establish a first-half lead. The Villa supporters had to wait a little longer for the second-half celebrations. Someone had forgotten to switch on the floodlights. When they did finally come on, it was Wimbledon trying desperately to fight their way back into the game. McGee's delightful dribble to the byline, though, produced only a desperate clearance. Then Villa conspired to put the result beyond doubt. Nielsen the provider, Daly again teasing Wimbledon's defence and producing the perfect finish. Leaping up the table, Wimbledon 0, Villa 2.
Elsewhere, Paul Rideout of Southampton scored twice in his side's 6-3 win over Luton, and a Cyril Regis goal was enough to give Coventry a win against Norwich. So the First Division has 3 joint leaders tonight: Arsenal, Aston Villa and Chelsea, who drew 0-0 at Manchester United. Liverpool will go top on goal difference tomorrow if they beat Arsenal at Anfield. In Scotland, a Charlie Nicholas hat-trick helped Aberdeen to a 5-0 win against St Mirren and maintained a 2-point lead at the top ahead of Rangers, 3-0 winners over Dunfermline. Hearts lost 2-1 at Dundee United. Celtic drew 0-0 at Motherwell. The All Blacks have ended a tour which has confirmed them as the best team in the world by beating the Barbarians by 21 points to 10 at Twickenham. The Barbarians, drawn from 5 countries, were trying to succeed where 45 previous teams had failed. And in the 3rd minute, Philip Matthews from Dublin scrambled a try, an early threat to the All Blacks' 3-year unbeaten record. But halfway through a well-balanced first half, New Zealand came back through Craig Innes. There were several moments of the open play associated with Barbarians' fixtures. Tony Underwood provided one of them, but it was more a match of intense competition, so keen that at times it even overtook the referee.
And Clive Norling is knocked over as well. I've never seen that before.
10-6 down at the interval, the All Blacks then dominated the second half. Once substitute Zinzan Brooks had scored his 16th international try, they were never seriously threatened again. By the end, they'd emulated the so-called invincibles of the 1920s. winning every match of their British tour. 71 tries, 454 points, 13 victories. A world champion achievement. The top race of the day, the Hennessy Cognac Gold Cup at Newbury, was won by Go Far, ridden by Huell Davis, beating the favourite Brown Windsor and the leader at the last, Mr. Frisk, over the final few strides.
At the final fence, Mr. Frisk lands in the lead. Brown Windsor challenging over on the far side. Go Far on the near side. It's Mr. Frisk, Brown Windsor taking a fractional advantage and sprinting now. Brown Windsor from Go Far, who goes second as they race to the line. It's Brown Windsor and Go Far in a photo. Brown Windsor in a photo with Go Far at the end of the Hennessy.
And that's the BBC News Tonight. Good night.
Hello, wrap up the rabbit, cuddle the car, because it's going to be a cold one. The reason, this area of high pressure, which is going to be there or thereabouts for several days to come, and an exceptionally cold night in places. Anywhere from the Midlands northwards, some quite thick patches of fog as well, already there in central Scotland and forming in other parts of the country as we go through the night. Some icy roads as well. Unusually low temperatures, as low in some places as -9 Celsius. That's just 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, that fog persisting all day in some places, freezing fog too, especially the Midlands, especially we think central parts of Scotland, but perhaps also Northern Ireland and Northern England as well. Elsewhere, hazy sunshine, the north of Scotland rather more cloudy with 1 or 2 showers. A breeze up there, but light winds over the whole of the rest of Britain, hardly any wind at all in this central section there. That's why the fog is going to persist in some places too, and quite a cold day where the fog hangs about. Temperatures are only getting up to 0 to 2 Celsius, that's 32 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and at best only about 4 or 5 Celsius, 39 to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. The far northwest, a little bit mud, as you can see, a little bit breezier too. That's a summary, you don't want it, but that's a rather cold summary of tomorrow's weather. Good night.
Sunday on BBC1. Songs of Praise celebrates Thanksgiving when Debbie Thrower visits New England. And then at 7:15, back home, Nora Batty is having Wash Day Blues. At 7:45, the final episode of Howard's Way.
In my company, when I want advice, I'll ask for it.
Oh, you've been asking for it for a long time, Ken.
A smile for Nellie Boswell at 8:35.
The secret smile of inner completeness. The kind Lady Chatterley must have had on her way back from the woodshed.
At 9:05, part 1 of a major new drama, The Ginger Tree.
This is your room.
Mine?
Mine's down the corridor.
Every man at 10:20 looks at the dilemma faced by women diagnosed as HIV positive. Sunday on BBC1.
There are further tales from Marquez in BBC Two's film shortly with The Summer of Miss Forbes, a black comedy about the dual personality of a governess who by day rules her 2 charges with a rod of iron, but by night reveals her weakness for more sensual pleasures. Our film on 1 at 11:40 is a thriller starring Eleanor Parker as an haute couture designer whose lavish comeback turns from excitement to horror when the VIP guests start to disappear. She's dressed to kill. And very properly attired are the players at the Guildhall in Preston, where David Vine brings us up to date now on the international snooker.